As you can see, it is time, well, actually it's probably past time, to hill the potatoes. The first step is complete. I have run the Troy-Bilt Horse up and down between each row and cultivated the soil up and gotten it nice and loose so that now I can put the hiller attachment on and it will have nice loose soil to push up onto the sides, onto the rows. Let's just take a closer look at the plants, see what's going on out here and how they're growing. So all these potatoes were planted about a month ago. We can see that these here and some of them along the way are already putting out the buds for blossoms. So they're doing quite well. It's kind of interesting. So these are the newer varieties. So the Caribou Russet, the Sangre, the Purple Viking, which is here. Then over here we transition to the Kennebecs. Over here is the cover crop. You can see that that's grown in quite well. What's a little bit discouraging about this is that in addition to the cover crop, a lot of that short stuff is actually just grassy weeds. So we have plenty of that growing in here as well. But this will be nice. I'll cut it down kind of at the end of the growing season and then turn it in, plant some hairy vetch winter rye here, let that sit over winter, and then I'll plow that under in the spring and we'll plant over here. But for now, what we need to do is get the hiller on the rototiller and hill these up. And when I planted these potatoes, in the video I made about that, I was targeting 3.5 feet between rows for the row spacing. Now, when you run the Troy-Bilt down, you don't always get perfectly straight rows, and then depending on how your potatoes sit in the row, they might be toward one side or the other. So you can see these two rows are a bit closer together, probably more like 3 feet, whereas that one's a little bit wider. So there's some variability here. At first, I thought these were going to be a bit far for the hiller, and they still might be, but we'll see how things turn out. It's definitely a little bit of a tight squeeze in that one row with the tiller. So let's put that attachment on and get rolling. Now, when I was cultivating, I did run the tiller in high gear, and I did run it at full depth. Now, when you're going in high gear with full depth, it doesn't dig as deep as it can when you're in slow gear. The other thing is I did not walk right behind the tiller because I don't like to compact the soil where I'm going to need to hill it up. I want it nice and loose so that this will be most effective. And I will hill with the tiller also at full depth, and we're going to try running in high gear. You do need to keep your tines engaged when you're running this hiller furrower attachment. If you don't, you'll just be dragging too much through the dirt and you won't hill up any soil. Now, even though I guide the tiller with one hand when I'm cultivating between the rows so I don't compact the soil with my footprints, when I do the hilling, I will have both hands on the handlebars and I will stand directly behind the machine so that I have maximum control over where it's going. It does track pretty straight, but if you do hit a rock, sometimes it does bounce off course, and it's good to have a firm grip on it when I've got that hiller on there so that I don't have it jump into my plants. one thing with these wider rows, or even just in general, is you end up leaving a little bit of a gap between where it pushes up the soil from each side. So what I end up doing is coming back through with an iron rake and just kind of pulling the soil up onto the plants where it's not quite all the way in. Down here on one row, I actually tried going down and back, doing 2 passes to try and hit the 2 sides. That didn't really work so well, so I kind of abandoned that and just decided I would rely on the rake to pull this in and close that up on the plant. So I'm gonna take care of that now. One other thing I should mention about the Troy-Bilt Hiller Furrower attachment is that you can adjust these hiller wings. So I worked them today in the all the way up position to get the maximum height out of the hills, but you can also angle it down and kind of push soil over sideways. You won't get it up as high, but you gain a little bit more width. I don't know if you see that, and maybe I should have tried that instead of this. Hard to know. I try new things every year, and that's how I learn what works and what doesn't. This year's big lesson is don't space your rows at 3.5 feet, stick with 3-foot spacing, so that when you do run that Troy-Bilt tiller down with the hiller, you actually get the soil more up on the plants. You don't have to rake things in so much. I went with 3.5 feet this year because I was thinking about getting the tractor down between my rows, but the overall width of the rear tires on my tractor is actually 5 feet. So if I had spaced the rows at 3 feet, there would still be 6 feet from the center of one row to the center of the next row, with one row in between. So you could still get those tractor tires down between those rows. So next time I will just stick with 3 feet, knowing that the tractor will still fit. It will just be a little bit tighter if I need to get the machine down between the rows. And that should save some labor on hilling, so I don't have to rake quite as much soil up onto the plants.